So I've teased you. We've seen, some skirmishes. We've seen people on maneuvers in and around the Tory party. But as of yet, the real Tory civil war hasn't, shall we say, turned hot. It has always very, very much been since, well, the Boris Johnson days and the end of the Boris Johnson days, seems to have been very, very, very much a cold civil war of people fighting in the backgrounds, making deals, doing alliances, and preparing essentially for the skirmishes to come. And we've seen that in the wake of the local elections. Everyone's on maneuvers. Everyone's out there for life after Rishi Sunak. We've seen Robert Jerrick's 30-point plan. Priti Patel's got her own organization with the conservative democratic movement of the CDMs. We've got Michael Gove with his Onward organization. Kimmy Badenoch is apparently also trying to mobilize her own think tank mobilization, grouping as well. So it is going to be there, and there is going to be a fight. And I keep on telling you, I am waiting for Andy Street to break cover. So far, he has been incredibly quiet, which is very shocking. But never fear, because Conservative Home comes through and delivers. While this might not be Andy Street, what you are getting is someone who voted, as they will admit themselves in a moment, for Andy Street and sees him as the future leader of the Conservative Party. Good luck actually getting there first. So this honestly is dreamlike fantasy fiction from a conservative perspective. So let's get into this, shall we? But before we do get into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button if you are new to the channel. Hello. And of course, as well, down below, there are links to the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link where you can, buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. And as you can see, it's zooming across the screen, as we say, but also down below in the doobly-doos. So go check that out. And thank you very much to everyone who does help support the channel. Even if you do, just click the like and share button. So let's pop on over to Conservative Home and see this from this guy, Alex I'm not going to be able to pronounce this name correctly. That's as close as we're going to get. But anyway, he said, after the general election, Street is the leader of the opposition we need. Well, prepare for some incredible fantasy delusions here, but this is what he opens with. The year is 2032. Andy Street is the Prime Minister, and he is cutting the ribbon at the opening of HS2 in Birmingham, ahead of schedule and under budget. First of all, how on earth you would get to that point is very, very interesting. He doesn't mention that part, but of course, keeping it on schedule and under budget, given the fact you have seen from some incredibly successful high-speed rail lines from the Shinkansen in Japan, right through to Germany's high-speed line, Italy's high-speed line, even the recently sort of finished, or still to be finished, because there's still parts of it to go, Spain's high-speed line, all of them over budget, over schedule. These things are big, massive engineering works, and you can never predict what is going to happen while you are building some of these things. And this is what these big, infrastructure projects have encountered. So the very fact he can't seem to admit that and getting it built by 2032 is incredibly optimistic. But there you go. Back to it. So, in his speech, he sets out forth plans for HS3 and HS4, building on his existing growth agenda to power Britain into the 2030s and 2040s. Again, while HS3 and HS4 would also be and should be built at some point or another, um, getting it built in that time frame, once again, building, planning, etc., gonna come up a lot of challenges. But there you go. And I like this. The wildest part of this fantasy isn't HS2 being delivered ahead of schedule and under budget. Uh, history proves otherwise, but there you go. And of course, we're not even talking about HS2. We're talking about every other high-speed rail project ever built. But there you go. No, it's the idea that the Tories could still stand a chance at properly challenging Keir Starmer on his bid for a second term. Under the current path, chasing populist and anti-establishment policies that sowed chaos and stagnation, there is little chance. But that's where your party is going. That is where it is going to descend into. After your defeat in 1997, the following general election was pretty much run on the auspices that 1997 was just a complete fluke and that, we'll come back into victory. We've covered this with Daniel Hanan very recently as well, but this is the delusion that they are building themselves up to. But hey, let them dream, shall we say? Because as always, reality is a very, very harsh mistress. But there you go. So, but under Street, there lies hope. In 2021, despite being a squishy, woke Gen Z voter, I voted for him. Despite having voted Green, Lib Dem, and Labour in every other election, I voted for a competent regional champion who embraced housing, transport, and development driven growth. I voted for a politician I could trust to tackle these problems, who will then deliver on his promises. So here's the thing. Has Street overly delivered on his promises? Yes and no. You can say that. Ultimately, I think the fact that you've got your Labour candidate, who I think really building off the Andy Street success about bringing bus ownership back into public control, was maybe, I think, what really won it for him. I think that was the deciding factor in that race. Again, we can't really know for sure, but I think that will have been it. But again, that will start, and we are seeing this now happen in all sorts of different local constituencies where you have Labour mayors. This was pretty much what almost every single Labour mayor was running on, and of course is now kicking off in Manchester. All seems to be going very good, very well. And hey, once this all starts to work and proven to be, an efficient thing, every other region will then want it. Until then, you're going to have people like Ben Houchen resisting the urge, but he'll eventually lose too, as well, as this is proven in other regional mayoralships. But there you go. So he continues. Now, living abroad, I was denied a chance to vote for the mayor of West Midlands, the region I call home in the UK. If given the opportunity, though, I would have been on the fence between Parker and Street. When debating the two with a friend, we concluded that Street had dropped the Tory brand and run as an independent, and we will have happily have voted for him. In fact, he would have probably found over 1,508 votes actually needed to stay on as the mayor of the West Midlands for a third term. So, had he gone and run as an independent, would he have had the backing? Ultimately, really no. You saw this with Jamie Driscoll up in the Liverpool for that regional mayoralship. Yeah, he got about 25% of the vote, but he did not have the backing of the party political machine, which ultimately he would have needed to really win. I think the same thing would have very, very likely to happen to Andy Street had he decided to just completely run as an independent, which, bear in mind, he did threaten when the Tories said, well, when Rishi Sunak was talking about cancelling HS2, which he eventually did, and of course, Street then did not resign. Just something he should, I think be brought up to him all this time. Why didn't you quit after those threats? But I've never seen someone ever challenge him on that. But there you go. So unfortunately, he didn't. However, one door closing in the West Midlands now opens another in Westminster. By sticking with the Tory brand, Street has now opened an opportunity to shape the future of his party. Within a year, the Conservatives have now suffered electoral annihilation in Westminster as the so-called... Oh, sorry about that. Just someone at the door. Anyway, where were we? Yeah. So you can see where this is going. That the Andy Street being set up to be the saviour of the Conservative Party. But here's the thing. And again, this is why we look at conservative film, because it's got such a good outreach and reach into the non-parliamentary party. Because the most recent poll for, who's your favorite cabinet minister was Kimmy Badenoch. She's running away with it, and has been for the past couple of months. So it's not just who's left, like as MPs to, elect, Andy Street. It's the fact that you've got all of the non-parliamentary party as well that is just as wacky and crazy as stuff going on as well. So any future Tory leader is also really going to have to deal with the big, deep-seated membership problems they've got as well, and really start to turn that around. And a lot of people do forget Cameron did a lot of stuff in that area as well, but of course he didn't keep on doing it, and when he got into power, that sort of all went out the window. But that's another discussion for another time. So where were we now? So within a year, the Conservatives will now have suffered an electoral annihilation in Westminster. As the so-called woke centrist, I will be enthusiastically voting Starmer's Labour in. But in the back of my mind, I have worries about the quote, what a too successful Labour win would look like. I love it. A too successful Labour win. Yeah, that would be incredibly good. So what happens when the main opposition becomes the Lib Dems and the Greens? Latching onto NIMBYism as their rallying cry to try and drag the country backwards. Here's the thing. Let's say you get a too successful Labour win. Bear in mind, there's just been another poll come out recently that shows complete and absolute devastation. I think it leaves them with 4 seats again. I am not buying into that. Again, would be amazing if that happened, but I am not buying into that. I've said before, you're probably going to get between, I think, 120 maximum, 80 maybe at the lowest. Now, of course, I would love to see what he's just mentioned there, that the main opposition becomes the Lib Dems. Probably not good with the Greens, but Lib Dems absolutely have a really good opportunity, depending on the size of the Tory losses, to be really become the main party of opposition. That would open a lot of progressive doors. Of course, he's talking about the NIMBYism. Yes, NIMBYism is a problem within the Lib Dems. This is how they run their strategy. The Greens are in the same problem as well with that NIMBYism. But it is all about trying to sort of say, hey, we need these things. We need to build this stuff. It's just a fight that's going to happen not only with the Lib Dems, but within the Greens themselves as well. I mean, Sheffield is a pretty good example. There's a reason why the Greens don't talk about Sheffield a lot, but there you go. Anyway, he continues. So even worse, what if a reform-like conservatism now becomes the face of opposition, focusing all scrutiny on the least important problems and offering no real solutions? At least, again, he's talking about the problems that reform would, of course, face as well. So, a competent opposition is now crucial to a functioning British democracy. It pains me to admit, but to keep a Starmer government accountable and focused on the right priorities, the Tory party needs saving. And Street is the man to do that. Do you think that the Lib Dems wouldn't be able to do that as well? They could. They've shown in the past and at numerous times have called out not only Labour governments in the past, but the Tory government as well. But the Lib Dems just ignore them. You won't be able to soon, apparently. I think, but there you go. So, how, of course, is Street the man with the plan? So, despite losing his election, he actually had a smaller swing to Labour than Ben Houchen, the sole now Tory survivor from the Thursday. Although Street's popularity wasn't enough to starve back the national swing to Labour, it should be at least a sign of a politician that the Tories need to win. And here's the thing. They ain't interested in that. They ain't interested in going in that direction at all. But again, continue with this fantasy about Street's the man to save everything. So in fact, Street had all the characteristics need to stabilize the Conservatives and create the right conditions to challenge Labour in 2029. Just look at David Cameron, the last Tory leader to win an election from the opposition. He revitalized and re-energized his party, winning a 35% of the vote for age 25 to 30 years old. Again, not long. He's not wrong about that, but there were obviously different things about that. You had the whole 2008, financial crash going on. The fact that David Cameron was doing a lot of stuff to sort of try and make the Tories clear about this. There's honestly, we should probably do at some point a video about like Cameron during this age and sort of how he changed the party and came in through the the coalition government and what he did during then. But maybe another time. It's a bit of a long topic. But anyway, so he continues. I would be surprised if the Tories actually cleared 15% of the youth vote this year, and for good reason. Yeah, I would be very surprised if they even got that high. I'd be surprised if they even got higher than 10%, but there you go. So the current brand of conservatism doesn't just ignore the youth vote, it shows utter contempt for it. Wow. Wow. Tell you what, have a cookie for you for acknowledging that. Anyway, it pushes for policies on housing and pensions that approach for acts of intergenerational theft or neglect. The quote Tory scum isn't an overreaction from Gen Z voters. It is just treating politicians how they treat us. Okay, good admission there. Good admission. Then, of course, I think there's larger stuff around that word as well. More than, shall we say, just Gen Z voters. I think it's probably a lot of the voter base that does feel that as well. So, however, Street can change that narrative. How can he change that narrative? Do tell. So, to win the West Midlands mayor twice and to continue within a hair's length of a hat trick, you need to win the youth vote. Half of the regions under 37s and 39% are now non-white. When interviewed about following his defeat, Street said only an inclusive mainstream Tory party can win in places like the West Midlands. And the thing is, that type of Tory party does not exist. It has been thoroughly dismantled, thoroughly ignored, and all current Tory candidates who are going to be throwing their hat in the ring, they don't stand any chance whatsoever. So, how is over the next 5 years Andy Street going to become an MP, standing, as we've said, with a voter base in his own party that is completely against that type of thing that he was pushing for? We bring up the fact of the problem with the NIMBYism in the Lib Dems and the Greens. That is the very same problem that the Tories themselves also face as well. How is he going to deal with that? There's so many problems. you would have to actually surmount to be able to do that. You know, I've talked about let's say Sadiq Khan, if he ever wanted to sort of throw his hat in the ring for Labour leadership, he would have to do a lot to try and get the North on side. Certainly London, the South, I think he's got that on lockdown. I've said before, if he ever really wanted to really win that North vote, he should run as an MP for somewhere in the North. Just as I think Andy Street, even though he's got a lot of street cred in the North, might need to run as a Labour MP down somewhere in the South so that he can get that big national vote if he ever wants to sort of become a a bigger political figure. So again, it's with the same problem for Andy Street running in that party. Or there's a lot of questions you would need to answer. But again, this is this is conservative fan fiction. Once again, pushing this idea that it's only going to be we're only going to be out of power for one term. We're only going to be out of power for one term. What's going to change in 5 years? What conversations are the Conservatives going to have? Are they actually going to look back on their policies and realize, oh, actually, the reason why we lost were for a lot of our own policy decisions and what we did? No, they ain't going to be interested in doing that. They're going to be fighting each other, which I've talked about before. The more deeper they're lost, the more they fight, the more this can leave us for maybe a decade, if not more, to get a lot of progressive stuff done. So where are we? So let's finish this off. So it is true now on the national picture as well. Street's brand of conservatism is what is needed to try and turn the sinking ship around. Now, to be clear, now is not the time for a new Conservative Prime Minister. It is the time for a new Labour government, and Starmer is the man for the job. However, the country will still need a competent opposition, and the Tories will need to reevaluate and rebuild to try and contest in 2029. Good luck with that. Anyway, without following Street, they can kiss goodbye to any electoral relevance this decade. Their best path lies with him. Yeah. Again, at least he does admit that. Yeah. Electoral relevance this decade. Yep. And everyone in the comments disagrees with this guy. Just to go to show you what I was saying about, the non-conservative parliamentary party, what they think about all this. So there you have once again this hope that some Conservatives are pushing forward that, oh, don't worry, we're only going to be out of power for one term. We'll be back at the end of the 2030s to bring in the roaring 30s. And yes, there are a lot of Conservatives saying that's going to be their new campaign and their push when in opposition, that you want the Tories in to take charge of the new roaring 30s. We'll see. I doubt it'll happen because, honestly, this cold Tory civil war that I talked about at the beginning of this video is going to become hot. It was almost immediately after the general election, and oh boy, is it going to be! It is going to be very, very spicy indeed. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.